INMOTION just sent me this brand new Kick electric scooter. I'm super excited to open it up because it's two-wheel drive. The front and the back wheels both work, and they each have a 750 watt motor. So let's get this thing out of the box and see what it's all about. So right off the bat, I've got to download an app and activate the scooter. I'm normally not a fan of apps used to control devices, but in this case, you're required to log in and activate the scooter. So I wonder if there's some kind of anti-theft features that once you get the scooter activated, maybe it will only run if it's close to your phone. I'll look into that as I go through and test the scooter. In the kit, it's actually got 6 screws, and I think 4 of them are for the headset. Let me install the headset screws and get this thing going. Pretty neat that this came with these tools. Oh, there's some nice tires. I'm at my local park, and what I'm gonna do now is just drive around and see how this thing handles. It wasn't that heavy, and I was able to fold it to get it in my trunk, no problem. I think it's between 30 and 40 pounds. I really need to check that spec. I only have one melon, so I'm gonna put a helmet on, even though it's not required in my state. Folding and unfolding this scooter is super easy. There's a little latch right here. I wasn't sure what this was at first, but it just folds down and folds out. I'm gonna raise it up and just lock that in place. To unfold it, I'm gonna do the reverse of that process, but there's this little orange tab. I'm gonna hit that little orange tab and just fold that down. This flap right here, I wasn't sure what this is for, but it just hooks into a metal hook that's on the fender here. So that's pretty interesting. That works. It lifts up pretty easy, and I can walk off with the scooter. Maybe if I want to load it up some stairs or put it in the trunk of my vehicle. So this thing starts up super easy. I'm gonna hit the power button. There are 3 modes. I'll talk about those in a second. I've pretty much defaulted to keeping it in the S mode or the sport mode, which has a top speed of 23 miles per hour, and that thing takes off really fast. In sport mode, the wheels do slip a little bit when I give it full throttle. Being someone who doesn't really use scooters a lot or other kind of electric vehicles like this, it's a little disconcerting at first until you build the skills that you need to handle. This thing is so much fun. I'm getting such a kick out of it. It goes super fast. I would even recommend, if you're riding on sidewalks, dropping it down to that D mode. That'll keep you at a max of about 15 miles per hour. I'm not too worried about going fast, but these handlebars, and I think this is something inherent to scooters, are a little narrow. So I'm not gonna be riding this one-handed because it's not as stable as like a bicycle when you ride it one-handed. It naturally wants to react to any inputs that you put into the handlebar. Not only that, there's only the one brake lever, so you got the throttle on the one hand and the brake lever on the other hand. The brake lever deactivates the throttle. If I give it throttle and then hit the brakes, it locks that out. That's a safety feature. I'm glad to see that included, unless of course you're wanting to do something like donuts in the parking lot. There's a single lever for the brake for both wheels, but it has one mechanical disc brake on the back wheel, and then both the front and the rear motor act as brakes as well. So that's a strange feeling because you have that electronic braking. And as a fail-safe, you have the disc brake that kicks in at the end. This is an all-wheel drive, so the front and rear wheel both spin on the scooter, but when you hit the dirt roads, it is a little more bone jarring than you would expect. The only suspension that you really have is that built-in air suspension inside of the tires. I have these tires inflated to 50 PSI, which is their rated inflation. It does a little bit to relieve some of the bumps like the cracks in the sidewalk, but once you start hitting anything a little more aggressive, you're gonna start bouncing. It's honestly fun though. So yeah, it is a little bit bone jarring, but you know, I just relax my knees. I'm not rigid, I'm not locking up, and it's a fun thing to ride. Like, that's one thing that I don't feel like you can express in a video like this is just fun to ride. So I'm gonna ride it around a little bit and get a little smile on my face. Let me tell you about the 3 driving modes. I have it in S right now, which is sport mode. Sport mode has a max speed of 23 miles per hour, and going up hills, it has a max speed of about 20, at least for my body size. If I double tap the power button quickly, it'll then put me into something called pedestrian mode, and pedestrian mode turns on the front and rear light, and they both flash at the same time, and it has a max speed of about 4 miles per hour. So I've got that throttle fully depressed, and I can pretty much resist this thing's motion. And the whole point of that is if you have to dismount to walk somewhere, maybe you're walking in public and you don't want to have this thing like flipping out of your hands, it gives you a little bit of motor power to help you push this thing around. If you actually try to ride this in pedestrian mode, I feel like it's super slow. So there I am topping out at 4 miles per hour, and I got that throttle to the max, and I honestly feel like I'm about to just fall over. So this is really just for extreme slow speed riding. If I want to go to something a little more calm, I'm going to double tap that again. It shuts off those lights, but if I do a single tap, it turns those lights back on for me. But now I'm in drive mode, and drive mode gives me about 15 miles per hour. And it's a little bit more calm in drive mode. So yes, it'll go 15, but it doesn't just take off and go. And see, I'm able to kind of like goose that throttle and it doesn't take off. But if I double tap this one more time, it puts me in sport mode, and that's where I really start to burn rubber. It just takes off when I twist that throttle. I feel like if I'm trying to do some tight maneuvering and I throttle all the way in sport mode, I could possibly lose control of this scooter. This isn't really a child's toy. This is a legitimate mode of transportation, especially in a more urban environment or someplace where you just want to go a mile or 2 back and forth without getting in a car or riding a bicycle. So another feature of this INMOTION electric scooter is its battery capacity. On their website, they claim that they're going to get 35 miles with this scooter. I put 2 miles on it today and I'm sitting at about 89%. So 10%, 2 miles. I think I might get 18 to 20 miles with my body composition of about 220 pounds using that sport mode. I feel like if I put it in drive and I didn't go as fast and there weren't as many hills, I might come close to that 35-mile range. Later in this video, I will do a complete battery rundown where I just set this thing on max and ride it as far as I can and see how far I get before it shuts down. Something to consider with my 20-mile range estimate is I've been stopping, I've been starting, I've been accelerating as hard as I can. I haven't really been going the distance. So just like the fuel economy in your car, if you're stopping and starting, you're gonna get that lower city mile per gallon. Whereas if I'm out, you know, going down a country road at 20 miles per hour and it's flat, I'm gonna have much better efficiency even with these electric motors. The battery recharge time, I'm not convinced it's super fast, but I feel like the charger could take up to even 5 hours to charge from empty, and I'll test that after I do my complete battery rundown test. The scooter itself is water resistant with an IP56 rating, which means it can be submerged just a little bit in water and is resistant to splashes. And the battery has a little bit of a higher protection of that IPX7. I'm obviously not gonna try to dunk it in the creek, but I would feel safe riding it in a rainstorm if I get caught in a rainstorm, particularly on my way home during my commute. I'm not gonna be too worried about getting this thing wet at the end of that trip. So my cameraman wanted in on the fun. He has his own helmet. He's out cruising around on the scooter right now. and we're heading back to the vehicle so we can get this thing recharged and do that battery rundown test. I want to know how far I can go on a single charge with this scooter. And then I want to find out how long does it take to recharge from that 0%. It might look funny that I'm wearing a helmet when I'm doing this test. If you've ever heard of Tony Hawk, he credits the fact that he doesn't have any brain damage right now to the fact that he's worn a helmet for his entire career as a skater. And yes, I'm not a creative stunt skater, but I don't want to hurt my brain if I fall, so that's why I wear a helmet. Well, I looked up the weight spec and it's 20.8 kilograms, which comes to about 45 pounds. It's a little heavier than I thought it was, but it's not too much weight for something that's got a 1500 watt combined motor rating. Now I'm going to do the battery rundown test. I have the scooter fully charged to 100% and it currently has 10.2 miles on the odometer. I'm going to run it until it dies and see what we get. For this test, I'll be following the speed limit and stopping at stop signs. I do have this thing set in sport mode because when I am on a faster road, there's no sense in me going 15 if the speed limit's 30, so I can at least hang with any traffic. I'm 2 miles into this test and I'm at 12.1 miles. So this thing is still getting about 1 mile per 5% of battery life. One thing I'm curious about is as the battery depletes, does it lose range faster? Does it lose power? I'm gonna be looking for those kinds of things as I'm riding this scooter. Going about 20 miles uphill. So I was going about 20 miles per hour up this hill. There are quite a few hills on my route. I am going both uphill and downhill. Yes, it is a little more expensive power-wise to go uphill, but it also costs me nothing to go downhill. Something I'm starting to worry about after being out on the road for about a half hour now is, will I run out of daylight? The sun is starting to set, and I started this test a little later in the afternoon, and I still have about 80% of the power remaining. I'm about 5.5 miles in, and two things I'm noticing. The first thing is I'm not used to riding on a scooter like this. I'm standing up in this upright position that's a little rigid. I'll have to get used to that like physically. So if you're thinking about getting one of these and just immediately starting to go on these 20-mile rides, you're gonna have to condition yourself a little bit to get ready for those rides. So I'm about 50% done with the battery life. I feel like I'm about 8 miles in right now. I've noticed something going downhill. On the really steep hills, I'm slowing down to about 15 miles per hour. That's at full throttle in sport mode. Going downhill, the motors seem to be limiting the speed to 24 miles per hour. That's a safety feature. At 24 miles per hour, the thing does feel just a little squirrely. I don't feel like it's dangerous, but it does require all of your attention to make sure that you're riding safely. So I just went under 20% and I got a pretty decent beep from the scooter letting me know that I hit 20%. The battery button is flashing and it's also limiting the speed to about 12 miles per hour right now. When I hit around 50%, the max speed dropped down to about 20 miles per hour. So down to 50%, it was hitting 23 pretty steady. And then once I was below 50%, it was around 20. And then now it's around 12. So I'm about 3 miles from home. So I'm going to take the next 20 minutes and ride back home with this last remaining percentage and see what I get. So I just ticked over 15 miles. I have 6% battery remaining. The throttle doesn't limit the speed. It's limiting the amount of power going to the motors. So going downhill, it'll hit that 20 miles per hour easily, but it doesn't do it going uphill. Well, there it is. I ran out of power. It's flashing 4. That probably means I need to go recharge it. This thing is super fun to ride. I got about 15 miles off of one single charge, which was okay based on the fact that I had it in sport mode. I was going up and down some pretty gnarly hills, which brings me to a really good point with this scooter. This scooter can climb some hills. Going up some of those steeper hills, I was hitting at least those 20 to 30% grades, and I was still able to sustain at least 18 to 20 miles per hour on those climbs. I did a complete recharge test as well. well, and the results surprised me. On the INMOTION website, they claim that this thing will take about 9 hours to charge, but in my testing, from 0% to 100%, it took just under 7 hours. That's still kind of a long time, but it far exceeded their claims of a 9-hour recharge time. So what would I use this scooter for? So I definitely wouldn't plan to go 35 miles on a single charge in sport mode, especially somebody with my body size. However, if I was gonna go maybe 5 miles each way or up to 10 miles round trip once a day, this thing would be very suitable, especially if you're in a place like San Francisco with those steep hills and you want something that's powerful enough to get you up those climbs. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching my video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up before I wipe out, and I'll see you on my next adventure.